Hello, podcast listeners. Today's episode features Phil Kerr. He's a master when it comes to the world of audio. You're going to get a deep inside look at what it takes to get your speaker to sound right, what it takes to get a podcast produced as far as negative something or other. I get lost in this conversation because Tucker and Phil know exactly what they're talking about. You're going to sound so smart at your next company party after listening to this. Plus, if you're a guitar lover, this is an episode built for you. And I'm going to give you the secrets to my Monopoly success, but first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Over the years, I've collected a lot of things, and I've never been a great collector of anything where I feel like I've got stuff that other people who are interested in would be like amazed. Probably the thing I have the most of.
Monopoly boxes.
Right. So I've collected Monopoly over the years.
And just to be clear, we're not talking merely standard level Monopoly, although that's in there, but You're talking theme Monopolies.
Yep, theme Monopolies. Monopoly history. I've got an issue of Monopoly from like 1944 that has actual little wood pieces in it, and the box is falling apart. I've got books on Monopoly. That's why I think that I continue to dominate in the local celebrity Monopoly tournaments that I play in.
I think what we got to do, JJ, is I really want to do an episode where we bring in 1 or 2 return guests and you just play Monopoly against them, and the whole interview happens over a game of Monopoly.
You know, I don't know if people would want to listen to the show anymore. They'd be like, he is not the man I thought he was. I heard him. I heard the manipulation, and then he let that person limp along just so that the kill would last longer. He's a psychopath.
Of our previous guests, who do you think would give you the most trouble at a game of Monopoly? I think Eric Hatch might be one. I'm relying on his real estate acumen.
I don't know. You know, I think Eric Hatch is the type of guy who wants to get Boardwalk and Park Place, and he wants to get Pennsylvania Pacific and North Carolina. And that's the mistake.
Okay.
So you don't build an empire on Wall Street. You build an empire in the reasonably priced neighborhoods.
Oh, okay.
So yes, you get a bigger commission when you sell a house for $400,000, but the amount of time it takes to find that right buyer is so much longer. So your payouts are longer. But if you've got a steady stable of $100,000 homes that you're selling, boom, 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 boom. That can happen like there's no tomorrow, which is why JJ Gordon's tip to Monopoly, you are picking up the magentas and the oranges. That's what I call Pound Town. So if you talk to Monopoly players, they talk about these things are streets. So First Street is where the go that leads up to the jail. Jail to free parking is Second Street, but I call it Pound Town. And so what's great about it is houses cost $100 a house to build. And so here's what you do, folks. You buy up those properties, which are reasonably cheap properties, and you buy and build 4 houses on each of those things. Why? The standard rules of Monopoly say that you need to buy 4 houses before you can put up a hotel. If you buy all of the houses that are available to purchase, a person cannot put up a hotel. They would have to spend the money to get all the way up to the hotel, or even more like hardcore, there's no houses to buy. So you'd never be able to put more than 3 houses on a property if possible. Secondly, I'm giving all my secrets here. The odds of you landing on Pound Town are better than any other street in Monopoly, because there are more advanced to specific properties. So advanced to St. Charles Place, advanced to New York Avenue. And then you can land and go back 3 spaces in chance, which if you get that in the reds right after Kentucky, will put you back on to St. James.
Hate getting it in the reds.
You hate, yeah. And so you are not making as much when someone lands on that with 4 houses as you would if they landed on, let's say, Ventnor Avenue with 4 houses. But your ability to maximize your cash at the very beginning goes for it. Again, this is why people are going to think I'm a psychopath. And then the second biggest rule of Monopoly, my second biggest tip, is you are not playing the board, the dice, or the properties. You are playing the person sitting next to you, and you need to manipulate them. This is the game of fast real estate trading. The trade is an essential aspect here, and making someone feel foolish for not taking this trade is how you manipulate their emotions enough so that they go for it, or making them think, oh God, I don't want to do this, but okay. I'm really shrewd when it comes to playing Monopoly.
Apparently.
Yeah. Advanced token and nearest utility. There's a utility on Pound Town. It's just, and then you go to jail. Any roll out of there, you've got to get past Pound Town.
I wonder how well today's guest would fare against you in a game that's dealing with housing. He's knowledgeable. He's definitely knowledgeable and thrifty.
Phil Kerr, the guest today, here's my worry, is that the whole time that I think I'm manipulating him, he's secretly manipulating me, because he's a guy who you can tell is incredibly intelligent, knows a lot about what's going on, and might, because he's listened to human beings for so long in his career as an audio professional, can understand my vocal tics and be like, he's scared. He's scared. I can tell the way from that clearing of the throat. He's scared. He
knows how to find a deal to in a way that a lot of people wouldn't think to, because he talks about it in the podcast, but he bought a house that had been abandoned because of flood damage, took it off its foundation, and actually moved it to a new lot onto a new foundation, saved some buckos doing it too.
Well, he sounds like the kind of guy who checks out garage sales and checks out pawn shops, and so he knows what he's doing. He's also big into the guitar world. And so if you're anybody who's ever owned more than one guitar, you have definitely known about Phil Kerr at one point or another, because Phil founded a guitar swap, sell, and trade. It's a guitar show going on, and we get into that. So if you're somebody who's interested in that, that's coming up on March 15th. But let's not do any other strumming before we get into this. This episode of JJ Meets World features Phil Kerr as our guest, and we talk very inside baseball when it comes to audio. So you might be tweaking your own home system while listening to this episode of JJ Meets World.
JJ Meets World.
Phil Kerr, welcome to the JJ Meets World studios. I'm meeting you for the first time ever right now, but you look incredibly familiar to me.
Well, I've been, a street urchin among this town for quite a long time.
Yeah, you've been around the block, so to speak.
Yeah. I wasn't born here, but I grew up here. Ben Franklin, Fargo North.
Oh, really? I was a Fargo South kid.
Little NDSU. Yeah.
I won't hold that against you at all.
Right.
When you go to, was it a junior high Ben Franklin at the time? Or was
Yeah,
it?
yeah, it was.
Do you feel like you have sort of a little piece of ownership to the Ben Franklin myth and lore because you were a Ben Franklinite at one point?
No, I wasn't a forerunner in the
You
social scene.
I went to
Definitely
Claire
not.
Barton Elementary on the south side. And so whenever someone brings up Claire Barton, I always feel like, oh, yeah, I went to an elementary school named after her. Red Cross, great nurse. And that's about the extent of my knowledge when it comes to Claire Barton. So not born here, but raised here in this area.
Right.
Have you ever had the wanderlust to leave to go someplace else?
Yeah, it just didn't really work out that way. You know, I like Fargo. I've been married to a couple of ladies that have been from Fargo and have had some kids that reside here in Fargo. So haven't had a strong propulsion to move on. Mother is still alive and living here in Fargo. So
You've had some great opportunities to travel, I assume. With,
I have,
what
yeah.
you've been doing for your career. So
Right.
that's got to kind of scratch that itch a little bit, eh?
yes, although, you know, so many of those jobs are you fly in, go do an interview, get some B-roll, get back on the plane, fly back home. Tucker knows all about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you don't really get to take in like the true sights and sounds of the area unless you
No,
end up
look,
like
there's where Paul Revere was born. Hey,
be like, get back in the cab.
wish I
we
could
gotta
go
make
there.
Yeah,
when-
Chicago looks great passing by me out the window. It looks fantastic.
My problem with business travel has always been I'm going to Chicago, but I'm never actually like in Chicago. I'm in Schaumburg, like I'm in a suburb somewhere, and it is the same. You know,
Yeah.
you get there, you check into your hotel where you're sleeping for a little bit, and then boom, you know, you're doing whatever the work is that you're supposed to be doing in that area.
Right. It's been quite a while since I've traveled intensely, but when that was the time, it was just like sometimes you'd wonder where you were because there's the same, you know, basic mall structure and there's the same, you know, whale of a fish sandwich shop and that kind of thing. So,
Right. Yeah. And you at one point you have to be like, nope, I'm in Pittsburgh. That's where I'm at.
Right.
Pittsburgh. Like I thought I might have been somewhere else, but today is Pittsburgh.
Not sure why, but I wish I was in Fargo.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
no,
There you go.
no, I appreciate Fargo. It's a good community.
So you've had a good opportunity to see Fargo grow and change over the years then too. And I think Fargo's
Absolutely.
in a real renaissance right now. We're really crushing it as far as
Right.
who we are and who we want to be. But there have been times like you saw when downtown became the place no one wanted to be. No one wanted to work here. No one wanted to position their storefront down here. And all of a sudden they decided they want to reinvest in the downtown area. But then West Fargo, I remember when it was a drive to get to West Fargo. And now it seems like these
Yeah.
communities are all just like growing and morphing together.
Yeah, I remember when 13th Avenue wasn't paved all the way out to West Fargo for sure from West Acres, but like in the high school years.
Remember when they built West Acres and they were
Yep.
like, it's crazy. No one's ever going to want to go out there. You're nuts.
Yeah, and there you know, kind of wrecked, you know, the good malls that were happening on the north side. I don't know, Valley North Mall had just been built when West Acres went up too, so that didn't last long. But
Speaking of things that didn't end up lasting, I lived near a Ben Franklin craft store, and there was that awesome Ben Franklin that was in North Fargo
Loved
too.
it.
Does that brand even exist anymore? Do you,
I think it does in some communities. I've seen them around. I
It
think.
still
wasn't
Ben
like
Franklin?
consumed by Michael's or some other
Maybe.
brand or something like that.
Maybe.
I
I wouldn't
loved
be
it.
surprised if it had.
It was unique because the Ben Franklin on South University Drive also sold fish. They had an aquarium in there, so you could buy fish. You could get your crafting stuff. There was a small selection of like candies, I think, too. And I love that.
I think even mid-sized retailers like that, I think get pushed out by the big guys pretty quickly. Like a lot of the things that you would see at that Ben Franklin Crafts, not everything, but a lot of it you'll find at Walmart now. Walmart will just have a whole section that would be everything that they would have been selling at that place. So I would not be surprised at all if that company has been consumed by something larger
Well,
than it.
even look at Radio Shack, the huge brand that was, and
Right.
it's just kind of gone away now.
Media Play.
Oh, Media
Haven't
Play's
had
a
what I
good
used to
one.
buy all my books at Media Play. That was constantly where I'd get that from.
That's where I got my video games. That's where I got my Muppet collectible figurines, like all that stuff. Phil, what do you do? What's the job?
Primarily an audio technician. I guess I've come up through started out in the audio world. Should I talk businesses?
Yeah, whatever you want.
yeah.
Please do.
Okay. So
we name names on this thing, but
All right.
Carrie Shelton was just here a
cool.
couple episodes ago, and we talked about
Yeah.
the local businesses, especially Snyder Film.
Yeah, Carrie's a great guy and a great shooter. So I guess after college at MSU, I was a music industry guy. Prior to that, I attended NDSU a little bit and was a band guy. Played in bands really up until about 2000, 2003, somewhere in there. And I'd like to get back going into that a little bit more too. And I still have a huge passion for guitars and vintage microphones as well. But anyway, got sidetracked there. What I've done is I worked at Video Arts as originally I was a studio engineer, kind of migrated into the video world. Ended up doing kind of wearing all hats there. And when I left there, I was doing a lot of 3D animation.
Oh, cool.
So, which was really primitive at the time, mostly flying logos and that kind of thing. Then I started my own company. It was Blue Sky Video Production. And that was, for most of that life, which was about 8 to 10 years. 8 years. First few for sure was just me. And then I ended up getting an employee and a second and a third. And then when we were done, we got purchased by Media Productions, arm of Flint. And so then I guess one of us is still working for that organization and the others are out on about in North Dakota still.
It's kind of like the way it works with video production and audio production in this town is everyone mostly knows everyone. And a lot of times everyone's like, oh yeah, I worked with him when I did my stint at this company and then I did my stint at that company.
Yeah, there's a lot of new faces though. I'm having a hard time keeping up with it.
Especially in the last year or two, the marketing landscape for certain has changed a lot in town here. And so there's just been a lot of reshuffling of people to different agencies, different companies. But that's part of the nature of that industry. It's so dynamic and easily disrupted, both by new talent and new technologies, and it seems to happen every couple of years, that I think if you are a video production or an audio production person, there's even if you have a full-time job, you feel kind of like a traveling gypsy a little bit, no matter what. Like, that in some way your life is going to be somewhat
but
transitory.
Come on, wouldn't you rather just maybe sit down at a desk 40 hours a week and look at a computer screen, maybe crunch some numbers?
I'd rather flip some burgers, I think, and get yelled at by a lady with a Karen haircut.
There's serious creativity happening in a burger shop.
For sure. Funny though that you say the computer thing because
I love restaurant work. I do, seriously.
Oh, seriously?
I mean, I could do that again.
Oh.
Yeah.
Could you really?
Oh, yeah.
Is it because there's a hustle and a bustle and like there's a camaraderie between everybody?
Maybe, and there's an artistry too. I mean, if you want to be a great pizza maker, be a great pizza maker.
So what would be ideal? Would it be as a like a line cook, or would it be as a server, or what would you want to do in the restaurant industry?
Oh, gee,
what's your favorite?
I mean, I wouldn't mind having a small shop or something if business wasn't good in another direction. I would entertain that, but other than that, I wouldn't relish the idea of going back, but there's definitely a lot worse things to do in the world.
That's true.
I sometimes think that with the workforce shortage that we're seeing in our neck of the woods, really, if there's ever a day where I decide, nope, I'm done being on the radio, I'm done, time to pack it up, I could go and fulfill and I could be the happiest assistant manager of a movie theater you've ever met in your entire life.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like that's really attainable too. And also, like, I'll read when I go by McDonald's, like, what, you've got, up to 50% tuition, like, assistance. You have got a base pay starting at, like, $13.50 an hour, plus you get bonuses. Like, they're obviously making a play. They want people to work there, and they're doing the best they can. So next time I go in for my review, I'm going to be like, just so you know, I have other options. I've got other options. And then when they fired me, yeah, we'll see how that ends up working
also,
out.
Also, about those life relationships that you end up, nurturing and keeping all your time and where they go back to. And so even though there's probably plenty of ugly, then eventually you're just going to remember kind of the good parts.
Mm-hmm. Commiserating over work is a really good way to make friendships. Like if you've both gone through like a really crazy shift and you had a lot of the same customers, that is a bonding experience for sure. Phil wasn't joking too when he talked about the collection of old microphones. I recently got a tour of your house because Phil had a CRT TV that I'm using right now still to play PlayStation games on. He just had it in his garage. So I went over there and gave me the tour. And I mean, your home is set up for audio recording. Like he has carved into the home any like different means of doing bands or voiceover work. Have you always sort of made your living area also like your studio and artist's palette?
Yes and no, not so much when the kids were at home and we needed the space and the real estate for other things. But now that the house is kind of emptied out, it's pretty much just me and the animals there now.
And your house too is one where it's located right now. That's not where it was located before. Like you getting your home set up is a story that I haven't really heard before. Can you talk about that?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, typical guy that, got divorced and making child support payments and that kind of thing and wanting to have a good property without, and hopefully not to rent anymore. It was kind of a hard way to get into it. But yeah, I was able to buy that lot and secure the financing to get a house relocated there that had been a flood buyout house. And, I got it for a song just by chance. It had been for sale for significantly more money, maybe 5 years prior. And then I was looking around the area again at some of the flood buyout homes. And problem for me is my lot was, standard lot, 50 feet wide. And a lot of these river properties are McMansions, really wide. So my options were limited. So, but anyway, up on Wall Street, I found a nice little house. And after I took the garage off, it would fit on the lot. So we did that. And it was quite the process. Took me a couple of years, but it's a great old house with character and makes a really nice little studio too.
What do you have to do to move a house? What are the things you have to consider when doing something like that? I mean, it seems insane to me, but clearly it's doable.
Well, I already had the lot, and so the options were a little bit limited. That would be probably the first thing you'd have to track down. And then from there, I guess I contacted a mover, checked with the city planning office, tell them what I got in mind, and you have to get the permitting and all that business. The house moving company themselves pretty much took care of the logistics of, for example, it had to get accompanied by an Oakport Township cop, I believe, up to the tracks. So then, you got Burlington Northern, I think, involved in it. Goes over the tracks, you pay him a little bit, pay all along the way. Get on the highway, came up Highway 75 and then in North Moorhead. So,
I'm just picturing like getting off the interstate or highway with something like that.
And I wish I could have seen it. I've got video of that happening, but I haven't actually gone back to watch it.
Okay. What about, do you assume that there's going to be some damage to the house in the moving process?
One would think, but not in this case. I mean,
really?
Well, one thing the house had gotten sold at auction before I picked it up. And then he was going to move it out to Kindred. The deal went south somehow and they set it back down. And so it sat there kind of crooked on the old foundation for another, probably at least 5 years before I got it. And I guess I lost my train of thought, but I guess, they did a great job picking it up. It was just perfectly level the whole way trip through. And of course, they're not blasting on the highway at highway speeds or anything. But for example, there was an old ironing board sitting behind a door that had been open that I had been in that room, but I had never closed the door to know that there was an ironing board. So I had basically the house was moved, was doing work before that. I discovered that was behind the door. So, I mean, if it had a serious bump, that would have fallen over.
Wow.
That never happened.
Because I would think that when I look at my house, if I slam a door hard enough, I get 5 cracks in my drywall.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would always worry about that. Even have you ever seen when they lift a house too? Like when they're redoing the foundation, they use railroad ties like during certain parts. I'm always amazed at how we figured out how to do things like that. And it's just, I'm very impressed at the ingenuity that people have. And
the North Dakota farmers have been doing it for a long time.
For a long time. Yeah. With pickup trucks.
Yeah.
It's just amazing what they've done. They moved my grandparents' house in Grandin. They used to have a home over by the railroad tracks. And when my grandmother decided to move into Fargo, they sold the house, and the person's intention was we're going to pick up the house and move it to another location. And so I used to always tell grandma, like, tell me, show me where you used to live. And so she'd bring me to like the vacant lot and she'd be like, well, this is where the house was. And then she'd drive me to where the house was. And as a kid, it boggled my mind to think, you moved a house? How many people did it take to lift up the house? That's so strong.
How much do you think you saved by doing that? Like if the whole impetus was to be sort of cost saving and be frugal, if you can estimate, what do you think you saved by going through that process?
Well, I suppose it would depend on what you had to pay for the house and what you might be able to salvage from the old site. I got, when I moved in here, I decided to put it on a crawl space. That was the easiest foundation I could do. And, the bank wouldn't touch the project until the house was there. So I pretty much had to, excuse me, have a chunk of change together just to get it that far. And then once it was there and they had something that, they could know that they could sell if you were to, go south on it, then everything was fine and you could finance it. So there was just like, a 90-day window or something like that in there where finances were a little hairy, but once past that, it was good. So I guess it would depend on like if you could salvage the old furnace, because that was a chunk of change for me. I had an electrical service put in. Of course, if you're going to do central air, I ended up opting to do that later. A couple of years later, I lived without for a while, just to not have to fork out that money up front. And plumbing was a chunk.
So were you putting it on a lot that already had like an established home, or was it just a vacant, empty lot? So you had
little house had burned down there.
Yeah.
And then there was an existing building on my lot that I moved to a new slab in the back of the yard to be a wood shop, which it is now.
Wow. That's awesome. Can we go back to your love of antique microphones for a second?
Sure. I want to talk about the guitar show too. Before
yeah. Oh, we'll get to everything, I'm sure.
Okay.
You know what I've been dying to find for years and years and years? So I used to host trivia, and I always thought, well, if I'm hosting trivia and I'm using a mic, I'm sick and tired of using just this regular, everyday handheld mic. I want to find like a Bob Barker style Price is Right microphone with the really long neck. And most of the research I did online, everyone said, well, this is a mic that was popular at a time, but is no longer popular. They're not really making this type of thing anymore. And I found one guy who said, well, you know what you could do is just buy a gooseneck microphone that you'd use at a podium.
Like a podium mic, yeah.
Yep. And just, find a way to stiffen up where the bend would be so that it won't bend anymore. And so I built this little, Frankenstein microphone of my own, and I loved it. And I put this little Bluetooth adapter on the bottom so that it could be wireless, so I wouldn't have to be pulling around a cord. And it's great, and I loved it. The thing I didn't think about is it's long. And so now all of a sudden I have this microphone that when I have to store it, I have to think about, do I have a box big enough that I can put this thing in? But I get such a kick out of that. And I love the look of, I'm in radio. I love the look of the old time radio mics. And
they're just little pieces of art. I mean,
they really are.
The casting and everything is so nice, especially the German ones.
So what kind of a collection do you have?
They're mostly old. There's not a lot of high dollar there. I've got some really nice microphones that I use for audio recording, which is kind of my main bread and butter. But things that I've picked up for $5, $10 from nothing, here or there.
Someone's cleaning out the back end, and that someone used to be in TV at one point, and so there's this weird old microphone that they've got. And do you ever think it's funny?
Some and
yeah. What do you call the style of microphone that I would call it like an Elvis microphone? They were primarily like silver in color, and you would hold the back
end. It's got like a big grill on the front of it.
I think you're talking about maybe the Shure S55 was the model number on that. And I don't have one of those. They're really common, and they have reissues of them now. But the original ones, they're a mediocre at best microphone. Probably really good when they came out but they're a dynamic microphone, so they don't require any power. When you see the term phantom power, and we're getting technical, but that's a little different beast. That's a condenser mic. So I'm not sure what these are. These look like dynamics.
These are dynamics, yeah. And these are a particular brand from Audio-Technica that we bought for a couple of reasons. One, they're versatile, so XLR or USB, you can use them for a bunch of different things. They also have headphone jacks on them themselves if you needed them. They're really good for podcasting because you don't need a real dynamic range when you're doing that. And it's mostly human voice you're capturing.
Yep.
And these are budget mics. These are like $80. But they get a clean recording, and then if you process them correctly, you can make them sound like a $800 microphone, as long as you're kind of doing it right. They're a bit touchy still. You touch anything around them and they kind of produce noise. So they're great for a budget, especially if you're getting into podcasting.
Well, in some ways, a dynamic mic is a dynamic mic. It's basically a variation on an SM57 or the predecessor to that, which was even the 55. And I think before the 55 did the waffle. If you've seen a waffle, I do have one of those. It's kind of a square front. Mm-hmm. It's got the waffle grid pattern on it. That was the predecessor to the 55.
I use these for radio recording as well, or for like narration. I've used it for narrating commercials and stuff like that.
Yeah, and they've got the typical stuff, I'm sure, that's going on. I mean, I'm sure that you lose low end, even if I talk louder, you're still not hearing my low end as I back away from this microphone.
Exactly. So, I mean, when we record on our setup, we're doing basically no processing. All the processing that board could do, I don't do, because I want as clean of a signal as I can in post to make it sound the way I want it to sound. So we could, like, if we were going live, we could turn on like a compressor and an equalizer on there and let it have its way. But I much prefer having the clean signal so I can manipulate it in post, which gives us
that was a little bit different in the older days of broadcast, for sure.
You just didn't have the computer software at the time. You had to have a real audio digital station.
Has it been fun to change up audio during your career? Because you went from, I'm sure, cutting tape back in the day to, today you've got the non-linear style of editing that is just, you can do so much with it.
You can do so much to a point of frustration.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, a little less would be sometimes better, because it's really depending on what you do. I mean, I'm not producing usually the next Steely Dan record, nor do my clients necessarily want to pay for that attention to detail. So it's a lot of wasted technology in a way. I'm glad to have it all. But no, I'm not a big guy that goes in and uses a bunch of plugins and that kind of thing. In fact, for most of the money I make, I really don't do much work on the audio beyond capturing it. So,
and I mean, that's a very important part, and it's a very skilled piece also to keep your cool when it's not working properly. I've seen some people who I really respect in the audio industry completely lose their minds when you can't figure out why something isn't working.
Yeah,
and you're
it's
looking
usually
at
just some simple user error thing.
Right. The simple user errors. These mics that we were talking about have an on and off switch. I can't tell you the number of times we've started and then all of a sudden stop, because we forgot to hit the on switch.
Right.
That's all that it was.
Usually I do a good job testing beforehand. Sometimes I'm in a rush, so I get here 2 minutes before we're supposed to start recording. But yeah.
Well, and even just, if we add an extra mic because we're going to have an additional guest for that one, and it's just the little things.
Right, but even down to like with ours is a budget setup. So, budget mics, budget arms, budget XLR cables, and you can still make it work with budget stuff as long as you really know what you're doing. But it would be nice
I like spending money on cables.
Oh yeah.
I don't mind spending money on cable.
For sure.
I mean, they last longer. The connectors are better.
Yeah.
Nothing better than an old switchcraft.
We are excited. We'll be doing some upgrading here pretty soon, sometime in 2020.
That's the sweet thing about having like a sponsor on your podcast.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of cashola running in, so it's not just Tucker and I being like, "Did you get your tax return yet?" It's time to put it in there.
Good gear makes your life a lot easier.
For sure.
It does. I also think what you pack your gear in, like that's how I used to like kind of gauge like how professional is this person.
Oh,
do they have an old tub that they're using here, but everything inside of it is well labeled and organized? Or is this person rolling in with like a really neat backpack and sort of the MacGyver of cables and stuff like that? And I used to think it was kind of neat because you can have all the flash and pomp and circumstance you want, but if you don't know a little bit about the art.
So it's usually a mix of the two ultimately. Like for H2M, we travel with Pelicans when we're trying to move gear from one place to another. But in one Pelican, I've got like a Gate City Bank neon like fanny pack that I'm like, this is good for holding onto all these balls and wires I got to hold on to.
I love Pelican cases. I love Anvil cases, but I've never dropped my sound kit in the lake.
Right.
I'm never leaving it out in the rain. Sure, an accident could happen or something, but you're insured for that kind of thing too. If that were to go down, it would be the inconvenience of not being able to get through the job. I usually have a backup to a backup on a location shoot. For example, I'm usually carrying 2 boom mics and at least 3 or 4 lavs.
I like Pelicans when you know that people that you don't know will be handling this at some point. So if I have to check equipment like on a flight, I'm like, that's going into Pelican, because there's no way I can be guaranteed that the person who's going to handle it from here to the plane isn't going to drop it 20 times or just not care about it. And most of the time it can do what you need. But ultimately, at the end of the day, especially when you're dealing with client budgets, you're going to pack it whatever you can find to pack it if you need to.
Yeah, no, it's not necessarily client budgets. For me, it's like the more I spend on gear, the less I get to have in the refrigerator. So,
oh, sure.
So I do have an anvil case for my sound kit. I prefer not to use it. It's so damn heavy, I just don't want to carry it around anymore. Just like the band guy that doesn't want to bring in the Marshall 4 stack anymore, he'll bring in that little combo amp and live with it.
So let's talk guitars, huh?
Sure.
So has that always been a passion of yours?
It has since before I was a guitar player. I have older brothers that are musicians too. So there were guitars around the house and that kind of thing. And I was always curious about not just the guitar, but the technology and the recording technology. So
here's a weird question. I've always wondered this. So if I've got an acoustic guitar, but I've got one of those like little 1/4-inch jacks on the bottom of it, is there something inside the guitar as well? Like how does that work?
Yeah, well, it's either a microphone or a transducer variant on a microphone. Just basically it's something that's picking up the signal coming off the strings through usually a magnetic or pressure impulse that generates an electrical signal.
Can someone take like an acoustic guitar that doesn't have one of those and add one?
Yep.
Really? I mean, I don't want my father-in-law to start a band anytime soon, but that would probably be the next step he would need.
Having that little project, though, would kickstart him. Like, oh, that's the thing I could do.
It would.
There's all kinds of them, and you could, a speaker and a microphone are just the opposite. So I've got like this stomp box that I use for when I'm playing acoustic music. There's actually just a speaker inside the box, but I just reverse the phase, feed it into the mixer, and it's a low gain. You got to crank up the attenuator, but I can still get a microphone sound out of it, a kick.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
My father-in-law for Father's Day a couple of years ago, he had a guitar. He's never, he's a guy who probably played in college, and he likes to just kind of grab it every now and then and walk out by the river and, strum a couple notes.
Play for the Ducks.
Yeah. Used to do like, pick up some sheet music and learn, like a Doobie Brothers tune or whatever it happens to be. Steely Dan, as you already mentioned. But he ended up getting a crack in the main part of the guitar, and then the neck was pulling away from the body as well. And it was because he wasn't using it enough to keep the humidity at a regular level, and just these things get damaged if you don't use it. They're made of wood; they're a living, breathing thing.
Yeah. And
I brought it into a guitar shop, and I said, "Listen, is there anything that you guys can even do with this that doesn't cost me, $5,000?" He goes, "Oh yeah, it's probably like $150." And what they did is they took like a little sliver, essentially, of wood, and they cut that out and put the sliver of wood back in. And he goes, and it will over time become the same color as the guitar itself. It'll do as air touches it. And then they fixed the neck. And when we gave it to him, you can really see the value of how his emotions are tied to this guitar. I had no idea we were doing this. Immediately welled up with tears, just couldn't believe it. And now, he could started playing it again immediately. And it sounds perfect. It sounds great. There's no problem with it. And now he's, on a regular basis taking it out. But I had never seen somebody so emotional about an instrument before, because to me, as a non-guitar player and as a non-musician, a guitar is a guitar, right? You pick up this one, it plays this note. You pick up this one, it plays this note. No big deal. But it clearly is that it fit into him, right? Like it was a piece, it was an extension of his own body as he was creating these things. And so it's no wonder that people love guitars. They love guitars, and they have different guitars they want for different purposes.
Yep. All of that. Yeah. Yeah. Talking about the lutherie part of it, there's some amazing technicians even around town here. can bring them back to life if you want to spend the money, if the guitar is worth the money to bring back to life. $150, you're already talking a fairly decent pawn shop guitar.
Right.
What about if someone bought like one of those cheapo like Walmart or Amazon guitars or bass guitars for like $80 or $90 you can get, right? And they just show up. Is there anything to make those sound any better than they sound?
Well, I'd say it depends on what you're going to use it for. But I am a believer that if you're a new player, that a better instrument, just so you're not frustrated with trying to learn on an instrument that kind of sucks. And, if you have an instrument that plays well, it'll facilitate your learning curve. How
important are the strings? Is there is a string, or are there levels in quality?
There's weights to the string size, and there's different types. You can play a nylon string versus a steel string. You could have a 12 string. A bass player has a very heavy string. Yeah, it matters. There's, flat wound versus round wound strings. They all sound different.
Wow. There's a lot that goes into it.
There's also isn't there nylon versus other
Nylon's
materials?
Typical, like using? A classical guitar. It would be a nylon string. Okay. Old used to be gut.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah. There's a line, a Shakespearean line. I think it's from Much Ado About Nothing, where he talks about how odd it is that sheep's guts could make men's souls, and he's referring to the strings of I think a lute or something like that, or a drum head, and that just made me think about that. So I guess before we had nylon strings, they were probably animal strings, right?
Absolutely, they were, and they're probably better that way.
Yeah,
really.
I think it's Much Ado. He refers to them as sheep's guts.
So you said you were into guitars even before you played a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's flash forward. Like today, what's your connection to guitars?
Well, today, it's last job I was in. We never really finished that line, but anyway, I was working at a company called Media Productions here in town, and when I left there, I just kind of thought, well, I'm still kind of tied to the event world. Wouldn't it be great to do an event that I was really pretty passionate about? So I thought, I've got my little guitar collection, and there's great collections amongst town. I thought I'd try to get some people together and bring some people out that I don't know, and showcase some of the people that are working on guitars and selling guitars, especially the mom and pop shops. I'm passionate about the small business. So I invited them, they come and rent a table from me if they want to, and show their wares and display what they do. Got a cigar box builder type guy that comes that's just really an artful soul and does amazing work. And Randy's father is a collector that comes every year, and he's been very important to the show. He MCs it.
I know that he and his wife Martha have had discussions about how many guitars is too many guitars, and making figuring
feels like that's why I'm divorced, man. I don't want to answer that question.
There's other reasons.
I'm sure there are other reasons, but the guitar thing.
Yeah, I do think it's one of those things where once you start any kind of a collection, you start curating that collection, and it gets bolder over time, and you've got favorite pieces, and you have pieces that other people gave you because they know you're a collector. My grandmother started collecting teddy bears at one point, and after about 5 years, she's like, enough with the teddy bears, everybody. I had 2 of them on a couch, and now all of a sudden, all I get is teddy bears every year for every birthday and every anniversary. But do you have any guitars that you're especially proud of in your collection?
Yeah, I've got a lot of fixer-uppers. I've never spent high dollar on any. I've got a couple of nice pieces, but some of the old vintage ones, they've just got the vibe. Old wood is really important to me. I like to try to find wood that before 67 is kind of the heyday of the good wood. And beyond that, the guitar manufacturers are having a hard time sourcing good old wood.
What happened at that point then? If you're saying there's this this demarcation point from it,
Brazilian rosewood and Honduran mahogany basically went close to extinct, if not extinct, and some of that happened, and increased sourcing of some of the good woods. And of course, there's new variants they weren't using back then. They hadn't built with spruces in abundant supply, and there's other mahogany and other rosewood available throughout the world. So, but they aren't quite the same, as far as their tonal characteristics and the look.
So are you talking about
grain pattern being tighter or lighter?
Mainly, mainly like acoustic guitars? Do you do like the electric guitar side, both, where they're in a different medium altogether?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love them all. I have a bigger appreciation for the acoustic instrument and some of the early artistry that happened at Martin and Guild and Gibson. Fender's mostly an electric guitar company, and they weren't ever really known for their acoustics too much. But yeah, and then of course the Les Pauls and Telecasters and Stratocasters. I enjoy all that. I enjoy the Japanese instruments of the 70s, and my current favorites are some Korean models that were made for 4 years called a Diarmond, which were copies of Guild guitars that were made in the U.S., but Fender had acquired Guild and basically shut down the making of Guild guitars in the U.S. at that time, and started making some in Korea, and then eventually China and Indonesia, maybe even, made these Diarmonds. So I like trying to get the first year Diarmond because they're the most Guild-like, and there's actually Guild guy over there setting up the plant. So quality control was high. I love cool. Those guitars. You can buy them for next to nothing.
Really?
So,
when you pick up a guitar, what's the first thing? What's the Phil checklist? What's the first thing you look at on a guitar?
Well, I kind of first I'm usually looking for a specific guitar when I'm looking for one, I guess. So I'm usually looking around for something that maybe I haven't owned before, or something that I think would bring me some inspiration to play more. So, I mean, like I've never owned a Gibson Firebird, and it's one of my guitar heroes. Johnny Winter played a Firebird a lot. So and same with the old Epiphone. I recently got an old Epiphone that similar to what Johnny Winter played, other than mine was made in first year in Japan instead of made in the U.S. So that'll be coming to the guitar show this year.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the pinnacle of my guitar involvement, is hosting this show. And we had at least 400 people who were through on the first year. And last year we had a blizzard day, but we still had a couple hundred people and a good show. There was still really good guitars in the show, which there's kind of three components to it. It's a show, a swap, and a sell. So if you get a table, you can set up and sell your personal instruments, or maybe your business. You can come and set up there. So yeah, and we, Gruber guitar and Flatland will be there, and Kenny's out of Grand Forks will be there. We've got Fowler amplification, Fargo guy. He's not really making a lot more amps, I don't think, because he's nearing retirement, and I think he's going to be moving out of town soon. But serious amp maker out of Fergus Falls that's selling nationally now. Vintage Voltage is there, and they make some unbelievable amps that
cool.
Basically they're kind of a la the Marshall Plexi era, I believe.
What's the date of the show this year?
March 15th.
March
it's a Sunday.
15th. Beware the Ides of March is what they say in Shakespeare.
Yep. It'll be held.
I think that
be held at the TAC.
There's something where you walk out there and you're among like-minded people. Dean Syme is a guest here, and we talked about the Fargo Record Fair. And
I saw a bit of that on Prairie Public too.
It's amazing, because I think people, just like when they want to know where their food's coming from, they want to know where their music's coming from too, and they have this appreciation for vinyl. And there are people out there who collect VHS cassettes now because that content hasn't been ported over to a digital source. And I think the same thing goes when it comes to instruments, is walking around something like this guitar show.
There's nothing like the warmth of VHS NTSC video. It just, how could it get any better, right? God.
640 by 480 coming your way.
It sounds warmer to me. I remember and I'm definitely a record collector too. I like my vinyl. I don't collect records like these guys collect records, but I still have my stash, and if I see one for a couple of bucks, I'll pick one up just to bring it home. But I definitely remember the transition to CD, and it was like no comparison. Really? No.
No noise, no artifacting.
No. If my needle was sitting like this.
The argument that Dean made on that Prairie Public interview was just that the general notion that you might get a warmer sound coming off of analog.
I agree.
How much do you think that is?
And he's really a purist. I saw
for
that
sure.
He's got some magneplaners.
He's got some big deals. He has a room where the chair is set specifically where he wants to sit to listen.
I saw that.
And he just sits and listens for hours to songs.
Yeah, the Magnepans, those are crazy good speakers. I've got a pair of those as well.
How much is the warmth coming from the record itself versus the system that you're playing it through? Because I've had success. I'm not as deep of an audiophile as either you or Dean, but I'll play on my analog system at home that has a CD player in it, and I'll play with the equalization on it a bit and get a warmer sound out of good speakers. So how much is it the medium itself, and how much is it the system that you're playing it through?
It's all along the signal chain, just like doing production. I mean, if you put something cruddy into something high end, it's not going to magically make it high end. And vice versa. So
I guess if you are dealing with physical waves versus
talking about the warmth of the preamps and maybe running through tubes or solid state and all that
versus
business.
Values assigned to ones and zeros that are being sampled along a certain thing, certainly at a certain hertz rate, you get low enough you can really start to hear it. A lot of argument is once you get past 48, you can't, but can you?
Yeah. And I don't know much about that world. I know like Ryan Jackson or the gentleman you just mentioned could talk a lot more deeply about that. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. I would definitely could get more consumed with that. I just haven't allowed myself to.
Speaking of Ryan Jackson, I love what he's doing over at MSUM
Absolutely.
right now. He's, just leading the pack with what's going over there. I'm just amazed constantly. So which is nice because never have we had a more attainable degree when it comes to things like working with audio, and more colleges are starting to value that, and there are companies that are valuing that, and even just the individual Randy, our guest who we were recording right before you, someone reached out to her and they said, "Hey, listen, I hear you need someone to edit your podcast. I do that."
Yeah.
And nowadays she can send them a single file and they can take it and they can throw whatever filter it is and take out the ums, the ahs, and the
I just don't know where the money's at for all the people though. It's like I've been blessed. I was in the right place at the right time and I've been able to work, as an audio guy, but the small studios, I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like musicians are able or willing to pay a lot of money to get their recordings made these days.
It's definitely a buyer's market because there's so many people that can do it. So I think the ones that are successful have a couple of things going for them. They're consistent, and they're good at building relationships, and that might be at that point. Then if it's not the gear and it's not the time, it's the quality of the hustle. And the relationships they build from there too. And I'm with you. Like the gig economy can only support a media maker so far, especially if you want to really make money in this medium. You eventually have to be doing, if you can, making something that you own that people want to listen to, and that's where you can really start to monetize if you can build an audience for it. But in the meantime, if you're merely turning other people's content around for them, you're a commodity. And there are more and more people like you every day. And for, graphic designers have to compete with Fiverr, and podcasters have to compete with Anchor. Like there are services that will go for people who want to have to think nothing about it. But I would hope, just like there are still independent graphic designers like Jeff Knight or Adam Weedman who are very successful. Yep. It's because their quality is higher and their hustle involves building and maintaining relationships with their clients.
You're going to get something that you can use, and that you maybe had to pay for it, but you're happy to pay for it because you didn't have to get into a fight over it or a misunderstanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you actually got the deliverable. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always think I'm going to pay a professional. I would never pay someone who just found out what a nail gun is to come and frame my house, or is doing framing as a side hustle because what he really wants to do in his life is open up a chain of fish sandwich places. Like that would just.
I'm only doing this nail gun thing until I can open that fish sandwich shop, you guys.
every chunk is another McNugget I'm going to be able to sell out there in the world.
Somehow marry those passions.
Yeah. I've married my love of nail gunning with fish sandwiches.
Open up, we deliver.
Yeah. I think it might be he nails the fish to like a cooking sheet, and the nail is helping distribute the heat through the fish. Maybe that's like it's a potato.
Oh, there you go.
Maybe that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Seems pretty costly though at one point.
Yeah, not
then
sanitary.
You can't get the galvanized nails.
But then you just repurpose it for a construction company.
It's all the
Local theaters will use used nails for sure.
There you go. I'm also helping out the arts community as well through
These
my
are ethically
fish
sourced
sandwich.
nails from local businesses.
Phil, in the changes you've seen in your business over the years, I really keep coming back to this idea of like there's all this technology that's there that's not being used because people aren't asking for it, people aren't paying for it, and they don't think that they
or just
necessarily need it.
redundancies. I mean, how much audio are you going to record with that system you got sitting in your bedroom? Because I would like to see more people, networking with others, so they don't have to have, you've got some really nice studio monitors there, but are you doing a lot of audio mixing here that you really need those, or is it for client demonstration purposes, or is it just because you want to check your mix, after work, when you could, probably go pay somebody for their $35 an hour or whatever, put some food in their fridge and check your mixes, and then not have to worry about the fact that they're going to be worth, 20% of what you paid for them in 6 months.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we could figure out a way to do this? If you go to an O'Reilly Auto Parts, they've got this big chart where you pay of the free loaner tool program.
Yeah.
And so they're like, yep, you come buy this new catalytic converter from us, and you can borrow all the tools you need to be able to get in there and swap that out in your vehicle. Given someone's still got to buy those things, right? Someone's got to buy them. But wouldn't it be great if we had some kind of like a trade program? I love the idea of, yep, I'm going to take this over to the Tucker studio and, like you said, pay $35 an hour to be able to sit there and use it. Then you don't have to worry about the upkeep on it, and you get to go there and you put food in someone's fridge. That's such a great way of explaining that type of thing. From your end, are you seeing businesses who think like, yep, we can just do this on our own. We don't need to bring in anybody else who has any kind of knowledge with this because my nephew
more
has
than ever,
camera,
probably.
Right?
Yep, absolutely. Oh man, look at the audio, for example. Quality levels on locally produced stuff is all over the map. Some of it sounds great. Other things, they're using 4 different sources and nobody's listening to individually and how to marry them together without it going, and while you're listening to it back. I mean, there's some really nice video production that happens, but it all really gets ruined when the audio sucks.
It's amazing how much bad audio can take you out of a really good video.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Oh, where they don't have any room tone in the background, and so like it's a drastic change every time a character speaks, and
yeah,
you're essentially sitting out there in nothing but blank.
But I do know enough that it usually comes down to the budget. You can't always blame the producer of that content because it was good enough for the client, or it was good enough for the director, or there was some technical issue that might have happened or something, but. Most often it comes down to because you had to be in and out of here in a half hour.
Well, even in an industry that relies on a lot of standardization, there's a lot of things that aren't super standard, like especially when it comes to podcasts, the LUFS rating that you want to have for podcasts has changed a lot. For radio and TV, it used to be like -22, and there was -20, then it was -18.
Is that right?
And in podcasting, it used to be -18, and now like Apple and stuff, they want -16, but Spotify wants -14. And so if you're making one file that's distributing to everything, you're going, well, am I making Spotify crank up the gain by 2 levels, or making iTunes do this or not. So you really have to Google.
And do you notice?
Yeah. And what do you notice, right? You have to Google and then see what other people are doing. And then of the array of decisions they're making, you have to make an approximation of what you think is best. So we master at -16 just because that seems like what most things need. But there's no strict answer to that. There are places where there's still zero standardization for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Do you ever do any sound effects work
I have.
where you had to like create sound effects out of nothing?
Yeah.
Is that fun?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah. Crushing rocks or.
I remember watching a documentary before the Star Wars: The Phantom Menace came out, and he said, "Well, okay, we got this race scene with all of these, pod racers," and he goes, "Nobody knows what a pod racer sounds like. No one knows what an engine that would fire up like this sounds like." And so he's talking about all these ways he collected sound to kind of, layer them on top of each other. And one of the things he did is he took a metal mixing bowl, the same one that my grandmother gave my mother, who gave to me, and an electric razor, and he ran it around the inside of this bowl. And he said, at first I listened to it, I'm like, well, this doesn't sound anything. This sounds like garbage. And then he goes, but what if I put the microphone on the other side of the room and it was only capturing like the tiniest part of this thing? So he did that, and he goes, all of a sudden, there you go. It's amazing. So it's not just knowing, yep, I'm going to use these things to create it, but knowing like I'm going to use these things to not get. It's as much as he wasn't recording as it was what he was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, especially if, you guys are more directly involved in maybe doing some production for cinema. That's when it can really be fun and enjoyable if the money's there and somebody wants to pay to have it done, or somebody's willing to take that on. But yeah, to have different perspectives that might match your camera is really nice to me when I like watching, something that was maybe produced locally versus something that's really good production. You'll notice those things a lot more, or just even the stereo imaging is interesting, but where everybody's got their own idea of how involved it should be or how complicated it should be, because he's listening on his car speakers or his computer speakers that, came with his $700 system. And this guy's got the whole audiophile deal dialed in and is really paying attention to it. So, where do you draw the line there? Do you produce for the highest common denominator, knowing that 90% of your efforts are going to be wasted on inferior technology? I don't know.
Same goes with color correction with video.
Yep.
You can have the best calibrated monitor and get the truest color in.
I loved the days when you just tried to get it right.
Right.
And you went into the edit suite and you did a cut or a dissolve and it looked good.
Yeah. But now it's, people's TVs are going to be too blue or too warm, or they're going to set it to game mode, or it's going to have
a little bit of a gut.
It's going to have it's going to have a fake 120 hertz setting to it that's going to make everything look blurry and weird. And there's now a push amongst major filmmakers to get a new kind of film mode that's in all of these new OLED TVs that are coming out. So that is the intention of which is to try to recreate exactly what the filmmaker was trying to go for.
That'd be nice.
So it's basically a setting that filmmakers would use as a standard setting for monitors would now be in TVs. So you're not having a TV that's adding contrast or bringing up brightness too much or washing out a certain hue, or it's tinted the wrong way. We're so used to watching things in the way that they weren't meant to be shown to us, and we just sort of go with it.
No, it's like people hardly even pay attention to aspect ratios anymore.
Right.
Your mind meant, you're looking at the round logo and it's an egg shape, and you just kind of, your mind makes it up.
Yep. Whatever. Isn't that the thing with Simpsons right now on Disney Plus? Did they crop off the top of the frame?
So instead of showing it, with in the original aspect ratio and having black boxes on the side, which I think most people would be fine with,
totally
they wouldn't
fine,
notice. But now they've cropped it and stretched it, and so it looks like it's in a widescreen format, but you're missing the top fourth and the bottom like eighth whatever they decide to do for it.
Right.
And
That hurts my brain.
You miss so many jokes because of it. There's so many great things, like when Homer's pouring this cereal in, you're missing what it says on the box of the cereal, which is an insight gag that somebody took the time to write and then animate, and now is just, nope, gone.
Well, that definitely affects the timing of an animation when you don't see the milk spilling in for the first 12 frames.
Right.
And it's only a 15-frame move. So,
yeah, I think that we're getting to the point of where people are understanding this. The layman probably never talked about the word aspect ratio, but now it's becoming part of their vernacular because they're seeing the setting in their in the menu screen of their TV. Back when I had a knob and tube TV, there was no such thing as aspect ratio.
Right.
It wasn't until I got my first widescreen TV where that was even an option for me. I think that it'd be beneficial to us if at the beginning of a television show or a movie, it said this is best viewed in, and then it gives you sort of like a little bumper for it.
That's why I got that old CRT TV from Phil, was because if I want to play a PlayStation 2 game, those games were designed to be seen on a CRT TV with phosphors lighting everything up and with a curved monitor face to it.
And it wasn't that bad. And when you're looking at it,
exactly,
played back on the right
when
system,
it's made for the right system, it looks fantastic on it. But then you try to play the same thing on a flat screen LED, and it's going to blow up because it's not just the aspect ratio, but like the pixel density is different. You're just blowing up an image over so many more pixels, which is going to bring out all these artifacts, and it just doesn't look good. You've also got lag time because it's an analog controller going into a digital processing system. So you'll be playing Super Mario on a Super Nintendo, press the jump button, and a second later he jumps, right? So this old media that is still totally playable and fun, you really need an old analog system to get the full effect on, which are now disappearing. It's really hard to find CRT TVs anymore.
So that's why I was so bad at Battletoads when I hooked my Nintendo up.
Yeah.
To my... You
handicapped yourself. You plugged an analog system into a digital system.
I was getting frustrated. I was getting as frustrated as 10-year-old JJ got frustrated after his fifth surge and a half of a Domino's pizza at midnight on a Friday. Phil, we're winding down here on time. Again, what's the date of the guitar show?
March 15th.
Is there still a chance if someone wants to get a table there?
Tables might be tight. I'd say they should get a hold of me if they do a Facebook look for the All Axes show swap sell event. They should be able to get more information, which is going to be updated here. And then I don't know how timely this podcast is.
This will be coming out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Yeah,
cool.
And then if somebody's interested in going to this, should they bring their guitar with them if they're looking to swap?
Basically,
the attendees just do it.
If you're a vendor, if you will, if you have a table or a space, then you want to get there about 8:00 to set up. And then if you're going to show your guitar, you can come as early as 9:00, register it. We're going to take a picture of you with your guitar. And what that's for is the best of show winner, who we don't know because this audience turns in ballots, you vote. We do a caricature with Steve Stark does the caricature for the award winner, so it's kind of a fun deal.
That's awesome. Steve Stark, one of my favorite people on the planet.
Yep. And there's 10 awards, basically electric, acoustic, modern, vintage of those, along with a new one this year will be best foreign guitar or import. We'll probably call it best foreign. So I'm trying to encourage people that might have Japanese or Korean stuff or vintage or new. If they love it, bring it, put it in the show. It's fun.
Very, very cool. Phil Kerr, you've been a great guest, been very informative, and I think there's plenty of audiophiles out there who are like, finally, a podcast that I can listen to where they talk my language. And then
hello, both of you.
Yeah. Dean, go back to work on your record shop.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much for coming in today.
All right, man. Thanks.
Have a good one. A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJ Meets World and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. So if an acoustic guitar is the daddy and the ukulele is the baby, what is the mom when it comes to guitars? If I had to guess, and this is me just throwing it out there, I think it would be the strap that holds everything together.